Which hopefully a lot
terms.
more investors are watching this show than renters.
Welcome to the Old Fashioned Real Estate Show, where hosts Brian Leverage and Jeffrey Holst pour out old-fashioned real estate advice.
Episode 41.
Welcome to another episode of the Old Fashioned Real Estate Show. This is Brian Leverage.
He's Jeffrey Holst.
Yes, I am, Brian. Thank you.
You're welcome, Jeffrey.
How are you today?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
Oh, excellent, excellent. We have this beautiful new setting.
We do.
Which I believe is officially yours now.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. It's officially yours tomorrow.
It's very masterpiece theater-ish.
Yes. By the time this episode airs, hopefully Brian will own this place.
Yeah.
Right now we're trespassing illegally.
We're up shit creek if that's not the case. Oops.
I mean, you are. I don't know how it impacts me.
Yeah. Figure it out.
So we have a really interesting topic to talk about today.
Yeah.
And that is, what do you do if your tenant doesn't pay?
Well, there's what you do normally and what you do now.
Well, let's start with what you
would
do normally, okay?
Yeah.
So Brian, you're a property manager. You manage several hundred units with your team. I manage a few units until this week when I decided to hand them over to you. And so we have some insight into this.
Yeah.
What I do when my tenant doesn't pay is I give them over to First Property Management and let Brian's company deal with them. That's what we've just discovered.
Yes.
But Brian has a little bit more nuanced way of handling it, hopefully.
No. We just changed the locks. No, I'm kidding.
Don't do that.
That is, for the record, don't do that.
Yeah. I mean,
It's a joke.
Unless they moved out and it's clearly vacant, and that's a different situation.
Yeah, so, okay. You know, as we're filming this episode, we're still in the midst of the pandemic, etc. Obviously, a lot of jurisdictions around the country have put either explicit or implicit halts to the eviction process, right? So in Tennessee, where we normally film, the Tennessee Supreme Court has put a stay on all in-person court cases that I think started in late March, and I'm told that it'll be lifted
sometime
the end of this month.
Yeah. Right? So the beginning of June.
Cases that had been previously docketed can move forward. But all that being said, you know, the normal circumstances would be, you know, as you do now, so nothing's changed there, is you always want to try to work with people, right? You want to avoid a vacancy whenever possible because not only are you missing the income, but you're going to have increased expenses because at a minimum, you're going to have to get the unit cleaned prior to re-renting it unless the person you're evicting.
And that's a minimum.
Professional
it's almost
cleaner.
Always
more than likely
it's
paint,
that.
You know, blind replacement, maybe some other damages, you know, like where people push a door into a wall or something. Anyway, you could go on and on. It's still, having said all that, much better to try to avoid that circumstance whenever possible. So old circumstances, we always try to work with people, you know, but eventually there's a limit to how much time, you know, you can give them. And then if people don't do what they say, that's usually a pretty good indication that they're not going to do what they say further down the line anyway. So then you would just typically start the eviction process, which, you know, in Tennessee, start to finish is anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks from the date it gets filed to the date that the sheriff's showing up to do the actual set out. So now since then, things have changed. We effectively can't evict. And so what do we do now? And, you know, we have residential units that we manage in commercial. We'll talk about the residential first since we're sort of already down that road. What we've been doing is taking, you know, we make them demonstrate a proof of hardship, right? You know, so a job loss letter, something from the employer, or absent that, proof that they have filed for unemployment benefits or some other type of assistance, okay? At that point, we'll figure out kind of what the need is, and we're typically looking to collect still at least half of what they would normally pay anyway. In those instances, we will waive the late fees, and then we will, we'll have them sign a promissory note for the deficiency, and then we will re-amortize that amount over like a set period of months, 3, 6 months, whatever, based on when they think their job or ability to pay is going to be coming back.
So the strategy is essentially the same as it was before. You just don't have the backup strategy of being able to get them out.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, so you're coming up with a little bit more flexible,
which hopefully a
repayment
lot
terms.
more investors are watching this show than renters. But to
Yeah.
answer your
Well, by the time the show comes out, presumably we can start the eviction process. So, in general, if someone's not communicating with you, say they just don't pay the rent. So, you have a unit, the person doesn't pay the rent. What's the next step? Do you call them up? Do you send them a message?
so we'll typically post what's called a 3-day pay or quit notice on their door. That's usually, it's pretty shocking to come home.
And of course, you can't do that right now, but...
Actually, you can.
Oh, you can still notice them now.
You can still notice people.
And by the way, that might be dependent on what state and jurisdiction you're in. I know some jurisdictions it's illegal to do that, but here in Tennessee, apparently you can.
Yeah, Michigan, I believe it is.
Michigan,
to
it's
notice,
illegal, yeah.
So you
In fact,
can.
it's actually a crime in Michigan to notice someone for not paying.
So
if
it's
you
driving in your boat by yourself, apparently.
Well, I think they've reduced that restriction now. You can now drive in your boat by yourself. Hopefully, by the time the show comes out, people will be able to drive in their boat with their spouse or something,
Something crazy like
something something insane.
So
So all of our viewers in Michigan know where we stand on their governor now. Fortunately for them, we don't vote in Michigan. So
not today. So
I have voted in Michigan in the past.
oh no, I have no doubt about that.
Many times. Probably more than I voted anywhere else.
Yeah. So we were on this little thread about, so you give them a notice. You're also, we use multiple mediums to contact people. So we're using email, text,
Is that
and
automated
phone.
from your system?
Not yet. We're working on an option that does that.
Great.
We can automate texts. And what it'll do is, we're just letting people know what they owe, et cetera. And usually, most 95% of the people that are delinquent on their rent are going to generally try to work with you. Some are obviously a little harder than others.
And those first messages go out, what, like 5 or 6 days after the...
Yeah, rent's due on the 1st. It's considered late on the 5th, which means you can enforce a late fee.
So around the
at that
6th
point.
is when you're sending out those
Yeah,
notices?
6th to the 8th, just depending on how the calendar falls. Then we're typically at that point, that's when we serve notices on everybody. And then, we also have a collections team that specifically their only job is to call delinquent renters and commercial tenants and try to collect.
Right. So
the
this
amount.
is a little bit off topic, but for this month, the month of May, collections still pretty strong?
Yeah, actually. So it's been surprising, when you get into an unknown, you of course, you try to speculate because you literally have nothing to go off of.
Yeah, it's not like any of us were around the last time there was a global pandemic.
True.
Hopefully we never have to go through it again also.
And so what we've noticed was that our March collections were really strong when this thing sort of started.
Sure.
Our April collections were even stronger, and then May is on pace to actually exceed April. And
wow.
When we think about that though, and I'm really referring mostly to the residential. We have commercial tenants that by law were ordered to shut down and thus couldn't conduct business and thus not be able to pay rent.
Sure.
So, but all that being said, the residential stuff, when you start thinking about it, you got a lot of people that got stimulus or some type of financial support from one mean or another, but everything's shut down. There's literally no place for them to spend the money.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Except
It's not
for
like they're
grocery
going to the
store
bars
or the
and
gas station.
I mean, they might be drinking more, but it's a lot cheaper to drink at home than it is in the bar.
I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, but you just don't. You're going, oh my gosh, like, what are we going to do? But, I mean, turns out most people are, fortunately for us, concerned about keeping the roof over their head.
Well, it's probably fortunate for them also.
Yeah. No, it is.
I mean, the reality is, even though we can't do evictions right this second,
Yeah.
the money still accumulates.
The obligation does not go away.
Yeah. This is the part of the show we hope the renters are watching. So if you're renting, you should pay your rent.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's technically even true if you're a commercial tenant. Your obligation doesn't go away. So if you want to stay in business, you probably want to pay your rent.
Yep.
And you might not be able to, and that's maybe a nice segue into how you handle it differently for commercial tenants versus residential tenants.
Yeah, I mean, the commercial, and to be clear, we do all of these on a case-by-case basis, right? Most people's situations are not identical, and that's the same is true with business. You've got, at any one location, on the stuff we manage, you might have a dance studio and a flooring company and a fire remediation company and all these different types of businesses. Some of these are much more highly impacted than others, right? And so,
like the dance studio that you just referenced, it
Yeah.
seemed like they probably have not been able to have
right,
people
or
dancing.
a karate studio, for instance,
Sure.
one that you and I are a little more familiar with. So,
Yes.
but yeah, all that being said is in some cases, what we'll look to do with those commercial tenants is based on when they can reopen their business. Again, we're not forgiving or removing the deficient amount owed, but we may add additional months to the term and then re-amortize that cost over that entire period. So you
Sure.
end up with sort of a higher rent period.
Right.
Rent
So,
payment, I
for
should say.
example, you're suggesting if their rent was like, just to make the math super easy, $1,000, and they had 10 months left on their thing,
of
you
the
say,
same
"No, I'm
exact
gonna,
example. Yeah.
I'm gonna make
An
it
extra
$1,100 a month,
Yeah.
and then you're gonna catch it up over the 10 months, and you're not gonna charge them a late fee because you understand that the business was in a hard spot. I mean, frankly, we're all in a hard spot. So, I think the people that treat their tenants correctly now will not regret it. The people that are not working with people are going to create bigger problems than they solve.
Right. And I think that's especially true in the commercial space because the demand for residential has been so strong. And that's been sort of another surprise through this is that
People are still moving.
leasing activity has been maybe higher than I can ever remember on the residential stuff. But on the commercial side, from what we're seeing, it's definitely dropped
And
off.
that might be an anomaly here in Chattanooga.
That's true.
We haven't done market studies to see where it's at everywhere else. Leasing has been pretty strong from what I'm hearing on our Michigan properties, but not like anything crazy strong. Like it's been pretty steady.
But the whole vacancy factor is exacerbated with commercial properties because, unlike a residential unit that you might have to do a little bit of cleaning or whatever, or even if you spend a couple $1,000s getting it ready or more, odds are you're generally going to have that filled within maybe a couple weeks at the
Right. Well, the
outside.
commercial stuff can sit
No.
vacant for a long time.
Yeah, a year, and you
yeah.
have to spend tens of thousands.
Yeah, or
sometimes.
hundreds of thousands
Yeah.
in some cases. And you might get that back amortized over the term of the lease, but again, it's still money out of your pocket and it's set vacant for a long time. We certainly have had that issue with a couple of our buildings where we've had things that have been vacant for a long time already. And then you throw the COVID-19 thing on top of it and they could be vacant for a really long time.
Yeah. And then, lastly, sort of a Hail Mary is, again, given that in some cases, like in Tennessee, I'm going to use that as an example. If you were to file, because you can still file court cases, they're just at this point not going to be heard until September or October at this point, which is about 45 months away from...
they might bleed through them a lot faster. We
Maybe,
don't know.
maybe.
They may create a
But
process
that's the new
to speed it
filings,
up.
at least, from what I'm hearing. But all that being said, if you've got somebody that just can't pay, that you're going to be stuck with that, like if you were to file, might not be able to be evicted for 4 or 5 or 6 months. If that person's paying you $1,000 a month in rent, that adds up pretty quick. So you might want to look at offering them a situation where, you say, hey, get all your stuff out of the unit.
Well,
give me the keys
incentivize them
back.
to leave,
yeah,
right?
An incentive, yeah.
Yeah, it can
economic
be
incentive.
like a classic cash for keys, or it could be like, look, you're 2 months behind. I'll forgive this past due rent if you move out by X day and you clean it up and it's ready to go.
We are generally, as I think most property managers would be, kind of opposed to that on principle of just letting somebody off the hook. But we're also not completely stupid in that.
Right. Well, the downside to doing it is that they can go to another landlord and they don't have that eviction on their record. And then next time when you go and run their search, you don't find out that they didn't pay their rent at this time.
Yeah.
You obviously would know if you're the one that let them out, but there are a lot of landlords letting people out of stuff now.
Yeah.
And I mean, there is sort of a downside to that.
Kind of as a tangent to this, you might be shocked to know how many people use you as a reference with another landlord when you've evicted them previously.
Yeah, it is actually really surprising. And they give you the correct information, and then you call them and you say, would you rent to this person again? And they're like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Not in any circumstance. And you're like, well, why would they...
Go through
Why
the
would
trouble.
why would they tell me this? They could have given me a different reference or whatever. I think that most people just don't think you call references is what's going on. So if you're, filling out a lease application, you might consider that your references probably will get called.
Yeah. And I think just a little bit of landlording advice would be, be a little more diligent on your background checks, and apply it evenly to everyone, too.
Yeah. Listen, we did a whole episode on how to properly and legally screen your tenants. So if you want more information about that, you should definitely go back and watch
This one?
Yeah, I don't know what episode number it was, but it's that one right there that
Yeah.
I'm referencing above us right now.
Sure thing. So I think that's all we've got for now, unless there's any final notes to add. Or
Well, you know what I don't like about this new format of having the drinks in front of us?
the table's too far away.
Yeah, well, we don't end up drinking it as much. When the drinks are up here, you just sit here and drink it. Like when you're talking, I would have probably gotten up and gotten a second drink by now.
The benefit to that is we probably won't be slurring by the third or fourth one of these we film.
Well,
today.
that is true. Anyway, so if you don't already subscribe to the channel, please do so. And, check out our Facebook page, our Instagram page, all those fun places. And
Cheers.
Until
the
next time. We got to socially distance. Cheers.